We'll be waiting for you when you get back. Little older, a little wiser, but happy to see you. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end, no dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning they. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Oh my goodness. Interstellar! Woohoo! Interstellar, this is the Untitled movie show, and this is the Interstellar episode. Murph! Don't let me leave, Murph! Murph! Oh man. Well, this is the Eric and Brad show. This is the Eric and Brad show if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or, Jesus Christ, my headphones are loud right now, or YouTube. However, Eric's not here today. This is just another one of Brad's movie shows, and my name's Brad. How's it going? Today, we're going to be talking about the movie Interstellar. And boy, have I done a lot of research. My God, Jesus Christ, my headphones are so loud. Somebody turn me down. There, that's much better. I have done a lot of research. I just did a word count on the notes that I've made. 2,007, a little over 2,700 words. 6 pages. And oh my God, it's going to be an as I was making this, and I didn't like copy paste anything. This is all just me taking notes. And as I was putting it together, I was like, this might be too much information. Like, I think this is so much information, it's hard to even absorb. Whatever. You know, what the fuck ever. If you haven't seen the movie Interstellar, don't listen to this fucking show. Like, seriously, when I did Lost in Translation and The Descendants, it's a different story. With this movie, you shouldn't have even clicked on this video if you haven't seen it. Because, first of all, if you haven't seen it, I'm jealous of you. And, I mean, I'm just extremely jealous of you. And I think anybody who's seen this movie is jealous of you as well. Because you get the amazing opportunity to sit down and watch this movie for the first time, which is an envious thing to have, an envious opportunity to have. And I'm wearing a white button-down shirt, and it's so white, it's like reflecting. This might be a just better episode overall, listening audio-wise than video-wise. And hopefully everything technically goes well. Hopefully I can explain everything. When I first saw this movie, it was a few years ago. And here's the thing. When I first attempted to watch this movie, I turned it off. And I was like, I don't like this movie, and I just turned it off. I get that that's a crazy thing to do, an unforgivable thing to do. It's just absolutely insane. I don't remember where I was at in life. I don't remember exactly, what maybe it just was the on-off day where I didn't want to watch it. This movie is like 2 hours and 50 minutes long. I mean, it's not a fucking quick thing to watch. It takes so much. It takes a lot of time. It's crazy how long it is. It's crazy that it's that long. And I turned it off before they even went into space. Okay, so spoiler alert. Jesus Christ, people, spoiler alert. If you haven't seen this movie, stop everything right now and close this fucking show because you shouldn't be watching it. Spoiler alert. So Eric and I also haven't done a podcast in a week, so I'm a little out of sync with just doing a show. And once I get rolling on these notes, it's going to start coming real quick. It's going to start coming fucking quick. You know how it goes. When the fucking the leash is just taken off. Hey, Brad, stop swearing so much and dropping so many F-bombs in a fucking movie show. This is supposed to be this is not supposed to be a rated R thing. Eric's not here dropping an F-bomb every other word. You should be able to do a G-rated movie review show. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll try to do better, but it's probably not going to work out. The F-bombs are still probably going to come out. Sometimes when I just start rambling like that, I sort of just don't even realize what I'm saying. All right, Interstellar. Oh, boy. First, we're going to talk about a bunch of facts about the movie and behind the scenes stuff, and then we're just gonna go through the movie sort of because I just finished watching this. What I do is I do a bunch of research on sort of how the movie came about and some facts about it, and make sure I get the cast down and all the sort of trivia and facts about it, and then I watch the movie and then just take notes during the movie. So that's what we're gonna go over today. I feel like this is going to take a really long time, but we'll see how long it actually takes. And it's just an incredible fucking movie. And there's more F-bombs, and when I watched it for the first time and I turned it off before they even went into space. And I remember seeing, here's the thing, I watched the trailer for this movie in prep for this show, and I remember watching the trailer a long time ago, and for some reason I remember interpreting the trailer as this farmer who builds his own spaceship and takes off from his farm for some reason to like save the planet. And I was like, I just wasn't interested in it at all. And then I tried to watch it and I turned it off, and I was like, I just don't get this movie. As the years went by, for some reason, then I came back to it and actually watched it, and then was like, holy cow, was that good? And then have just came to love it, and then, being aware of everybody else being like, wow, it's one of the greatest movies of all time, and then me agreeing with them and being like, yeah, you're right, it is. It's an incredible fucking movie. There's an F-bomb for you. Boom! Murph, don't let me leave, Murph! Okay, so here we go. Let's try to do this. Let's just try to do this. And also, I remember the first time I watched it, totally, it's hard to understand. I was at the end of it. I was like, well, I don't really understand what happened in the end. I mean, I kind of do, but I kind of don't. And I think now that after all this research I've done, I think I definitely have a better grasp on sort of the science behind the whole movie. I think, and we'll try to get through that because it's a tough one. It's a tough little cookie to crack. And there's a lot about the research that I've done for this movie that has made me appreciate so much more of it, so many more aspects of it. Like, oh my God. And really has made me appreciate more aspects of film in general, just doing research for this episode. And I think you might find some of that too, because I'm sure I'll be dropping, I guarantee I'll be giving you some information about this movie that you didn't know before. And that's just surprising because you've probably seen this more than once. This is definitely a rewatchable movie. That's a good thing about it. There's a lot of movies that are like, you watch it once and you're like, I don't need to see that again, really. I just don't need to. And this one you can rewatch and watch over and over, and it's great. And you'll catch things that are different and stuff like that. For those of you that are just listening, I'm wearing the brightest white shirt right now. It's like half the screen of the video episode is just blaring with like from a wormhole of fucking bright light. It's like, Jesus Christ. Am I a bulk being? Have I entered into the fifth dimension? I don't know. Let's find out. So, Interstellar, released on November 5th, 2014 in the United States. Okay, November 5th. Remember the 5th of November. Almost in about a month from now, we'll be creeping up on 7 years ago that this movie was released. Interstellar is a 2014 epic science fiction drama film co-written, directed, and produced by Christopher Nolan. It stars Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, and many others, set in a dystopian future where humanity is struggling to survive. The film follows a group of astronauts who travel through a wormhole near Saturn in search of a new home for humanity. So Christopher Nolan, great director. He's a British/American man. He's a fucking amazing director. He's one of the highest paid directors. He's sort of became notorious now in his directing career to be very big budget and have these giant budgets for movies and stuff like that and make these huge, larger-than-life movies. He made the Dark Knight trilogy, the Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises in the, late 2000s to early 2010s. And he did an incredible job with those films. Everybody who loves Batman or in comic books in general owes this man a lot because, for one, at the end of the 90s, the Batman film franchise was basically ran into the ground and shattered into a million pieces and fucking just underneath a pile of garbage, and Christopher Nolan resurrected the whole thing and legitimized the whole thing. So, I mean, he did the Dark Knight trilogy, he did Memento, was his first kind of real film, Inception and Tenet, and Interstellar. And I know on this show, the Eric and Brad show, Eric said, Inception sucked, and I was like, yeah. But a few months ago, I rewatched it. It doesn't suck. It's actually great. Okay, so Christopher Nolan, just a great director. And there's a lot about this movie that proves why, and we'll get into that. So starring Matthew McConaughey and who everybody knows, and while he did a bunch of corny stuff, he did like rom-coms, like the movie Failure to Launch, and a bunch of sort of shitty movies, Magic Mike and stuff like that. He's also done a lot of things that are incredible. Interstellar being one. The first season of True Detective, which the first season of True Detective I'll put up against any other season of television ever made. I fucking seriously love that first season of True Detective. I think it's pretty much a masterpiece, and I'd love to I want to rewatch it again here soon. I've seen it 3 or 4 times easily. It's so creepy and terrifying that it's hard for me to rewatch, but I want to rewatch it again here soon, just because of the whole little kid stuff that goes on in it. But it's absolutely incredible, and he's incredible in it. The movie Dallas Buyers Club, which the movie Dallas Buyers Club he did right before this Interstellar, which I watched once, and that's one of those movies I feel like there's not a lot of rewatchability in it, but he won the Oscar for Best Actor for that movie, so he did obviously an amazing job in that movie. It was a small little independent film about sort of HIV and stuff like that, and AIDS. He did that right before Interstellar, and then the movie Mud, which I guess he filmed, I think, right before Interstellar, but hadn't been out yet because Christopher Nolan saw an early screening of Mud and realized when he saw that early screening of Mud, he said, that's my guy right there, that Matthew McConaughey, I want him for Interstellar. And Mud is an incredible, I love Mud. That's just such a good movie because it's sort of like a coming-of-age tale of 2 young kids. But at the same time, then you have Matthew McConaughey, who's like a on-the-run outlaw that the kids help and stuff like that. It's just incredible. But yeah, so he's done some shitty stuff, and then he's sort of done a few masterpieces, in my opinion, if you just want to talk True Detective and Interstellar. And then Anne Hathaway, which I really don't like. I really have a bias towards not liking her. She just seems like a cold, dead fish to me. And I always joke that in every contract she takes for a movie, she requires that she have a close-up shot on her face while she's crying for a long extended period of time. And I just don't like her, and I never have. This is the one pass she gets from me. And how could you not like her? You don't have an open mind, whatever. Look, I'm just being honest about my bias. I just don't like her. In this movie, I think she's cast perfectly, and I think she does an incredible job. You got to give credit where credit is due. Even though I don't like her, I'm not rushing to see an Anne Hathaway movie. If I see that she's in a movie, I'm like, oh, God damn it. I have to watch her in the movie. In this movie, though, she gets a 100% pass from me because she's pretty perfect in it. I really like her in this movie. If you ask me what's the greatest Anne Hathaway role, I'd be like, this movie. It's not even close for me, personally. And there's a ton of other actors and actresses in this movie that are pretty well known. It's actually kind of a star-studded cast, which is becoming more star-studded as time goes on, and we'll talk about that. But the casting is top-notch, incredibly perfect. It is just, I think the casting in this movie is no mistakes made at all. It's perfect. I think you couldn't replace anybody with anybody else. It's just great. So Matthew McConaughey plays Joseph Cooper, an engineer and pilot, one of the best NASA ever had, an explorer at heart, and an explorer and a pioneer at heart. While sitting on the front porch with his dad having a beer, in one scene, his dad has the line, "You were born either 40 years too early or 40 years too late." So it seems kind of in the beginning we get the vibes that Coop never really accomplished what he wanted to as a pilot and engineer. I mean, not saying he maybe didn't have success, but I think he's more of like a cut from like a Christopher Columbus explorer cloth where he knew he could really kind of make his mark a lot greater than he did in his career. And like his dad was saying, he might have been born at the wrong time because he's born at this time where humanity's struggling and farmers are more needed than engineers and pilots. So now he's kind of just pigeonholed into being a farmer, and that's just not his thing. He and his kids even tell him, "Dad, you hate being a farmer." Like he wasn't born to be a farmer. He wasn't born to be a caretaker. He was meant to be an explorer and a pioneer. So wow. My notes, fucking weird. So the budget for this movie was $165 million. It made $700 million at the box office. It was a fucking commercial success. To get a little perspective, Dark Knight Rises, which was Christopher Nolan. This was the first film Christopher Nolan did after the Batman trilogy. So he did Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, then he did Inception, then he did The Dark Knight Rises, and then after The Dark Knight Rises, he did Interstellar. And people were kind of like really curious to see Interstellar, and they were like, let's see Christopher Nolan's follow-up to the Batman movies. Like, what's he going to do after the Batman movies? But to give a little perspective, the budget for Interstellar was $165 million. The budget for Dark Knight Rises was $230 million. So he went down in budget for Interstellar, which seems crazy. It almost, if you had to guess, you'd almost say Interstellar was a bigger budget film, but no, it wasn't. It was the 10th highest grossing film of 2014. Interstellar received positive reviews for its screenplay, direction, themes, visual effects, musical score, acting, and ambition. At the 87th Academy Awards, the film won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. It was nominated for Best Original Score, Best Sound Mixing, Best Sound Editing, and Best Production Design. So it only won one Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. It was nominated for Best Original Score, which, as we'll talk about, I feel like I'm curious what won Best Original Score that year, because I can guarantee you, I'd say the score, like the composed music made for Interstellar, was far better. Also, no Best Picture nominee, no Best Actor nominee, no Best Director nominee. So, kind of looking back, it feels like it got snubbed for awards a little bit. But then, when I looked, the Best Picture award for that year was the movie Birdman, which I loved that movie so much when it came out and I saw it. I rewatched it a few months ago, still love it. The movie Birdman is a absolutely incredible movie. If I had to pick between the two, I'd probably pick Interstellar, but it's hard to argue against Birdman because it was really good. As time goes on, it might be easier to argue against. I don't know. That was kind of a strong year for movies, I feel like. The film takes place in 2067, so it takes place in the near future, which is like, 45 years from now? And Professor Brand, who's played by Michael Caine, and Coop's father, represent our generation, represent me. That's in 2067. That's who I would be. Those guys. So you hear Coop's dad when they're sitting on the porch talking. He's saying, back in the day, there was like a new invention every day. There was a new product every day. People were obsessed with getting the newest gadgets and stuff like that. There were 6 billion people on the planet, and everyone sort of wanted it all, wanted all the new hot tech. And he's describing today. He's describing what's happening right now. And it's cool that those guys sort of represent me, represent where I would be in 2067. Professor Brand and Coop's father represent that. And Coop would represent my kid, and Murph would represent my grandkid in 2067. The planet's experiencing a food shortage and dust storms. Christopher Nolan doesn't tell us exactly sort of what happened to the world, which I like a lot. It's sort of, figure it out. It's only 45 years of a gap. Figure it out. We're not gonna waste our time telling you exactly what happened to the world. Obviously, something has happened, or stuff has deteriorated so quickly. And like they say in it, there's no shortage of engineers or pilots, or there's no shortage of TV screens or pilots or something. There's a shortage of food. And NASA has become sort of a secret underground society. So farmers become like in high demand, not, TikTok stars or engineers. There's a shortage of food. It's hard to grow food. Like the dirt has turned on us. The atmosphere has turned on us. All you can really grow at that point is corn. So as far as the inception of, I don't even know if that makes sense. As far as like the birth of Interstellar. So the idea for Interstellar was conceived by Linda Obst, a movie producer with a degree in philosophy, and Kip Thorne, a theoretical physicist who specializes in gravitational physics and astrophysics and is a longtime friend of Stephen Hawking. And this Kip Thorne guy is he's the real deal. He's one of the brightest and smartest scientists we have left in the world, like one of the smartest minds in the world. And I guess him and Linda were set up on a blind date years ago, and it didn't work out. And now they're both married, but they're still they still stay in touch, and they were sort of bouncing ideas around. And since she's a movie producer and he's a theoretical physicist, and the two conceived of a scenario based on Kip Thorne's work, since he specializes in gravitational physics and astrophysics. This all is like the perfect. It's like the perfect storm. The two conceived of a scenario based on Kip Thorne's work about the most exotic events in the universe suddenly becoming accessible to humans. They wrote an 8-page movie treatment, and an 8-page movie treatment to sort of try, let's get this movie made. Let's turn this over to a director who wants to make a movie about this. This is a good idea for a movie. And who became interested? Steven Spielberg. So he became interested in directing the movie with Paramount Pictures, and in March 2007, this is how far back this goes, this was in 2007, Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan's brother, was hired to write the screenplay. Kip Thorne was attached as a producer of the film, and Kip Thorne stayed a producer through the whole, making of this movie, which is kind of odd. I mean, I guess it's not that odd, but it's kind of unlikely almost that this theoretical physicist would be a producer of the movie Interstellar. It makes sense that he'd be like a consultant, but same thing, I guess. So he's attached as a producer of the film, and all the mathematical equations you see in the film, whether it's notes on paper or equations on the blackboards in Professor Brand's office, are all real equations that Kip Thorne wrote on the blackboards. In 2013, here's another crazy fact. In 2013, no one knew what black holes looked like. Kip Thorne collaborated with the visual effects department and gave them tons of deep-sourced theoretical equations regarding black holes, and they built a black hole for Interstellar, like visually. And then years later, in 2019, 6 years after Interstellar had been out, NASA captured the first picture of a black hole, and what do you know? It looked exactly like the black hole in Interstellar, right? It was dead on. So it was like, wow, that's crazy. So this Kip Thorne guy is the real deal, and that's why this movie is very scientifically, accurate, or at least theoretically accurate, right? For the most part, in 2007, after Jonathan Nolan had been hired to write the screenplay, and Kip Thorne got attached, and Steven Spielberg wanted to do it, for the most part, after that, the movie kind of got shelved, and Steven Spielberg eventually left the project. In 2012, years later, Jonathan Nolan recommended to Paramount that his brother direct, Christopher Nolan. And for that time, between 2007 and 2012, Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan obviously had been hanging out, and Christopher Nolan had been hearing about this project for a long time, and then finally agreed to come aboard as the director. It was distributed by Paramount in the U.S. and by Warner Brothers worldwide. Christopher Nolan made changes to his brother's script, and Christopher Nolan added the whole father-daughter relationship and making the movie more about love and family and with more of a personal touch. I'm guessing in the beginning it was more just of a scientific space action thing, and Christopher Nolan said, this needs a little more of a personal depth than that, a little more intimate. So at the time Christopher Nolan came onto the project, his brother had been working on this script for 4 years. Jonathan Nolan took classes at the California Institute of Technology. Jonathan Nolan and Kip Thorne sort of had this giant array of ideas, and but he took class. He studied relativity at the California Institute of Technology purely for this project to write the script for it. Kip Thorne and Jonathan Nolan had this huge array of ideas in the script, and Christopher Nolan filtered out a lot of the ideas and kept some of them, trying to make the script as digestible as possible for an audience. For the... Goddamn, people are texting me. Trying to make the script as digestible for audience. For the main character, Nolan wanted a quote-unquote everyman who the audience could connect with. And he became interested in casting Matthew McConaughey after seeing the 2012 film Mud, and then visited him on the set of True Detective to discuss Interstellar. Brilliant, pretty much brilliant idea to have old Matty McConaughey in the movie. Christopher Nolan wanted as little CGI in the movie as possible, and he is kind of notorious for that in his movies. Doesn't like to use a lot of CGI, which I admire wholeheartedly. And I was trying to think of where I would rank Christopher Nolan in my list of directors that I like, because I always say my 1 and 2 are Quentin Tarantino and Stanley Kubrick, and not 1 and 2, tied for 1. So those are both 1, and then probably Martin Scorsese would be number 2. And then Christopher Nolan might find his way into the top 5. I mean, I like The Dark Knight, and I like this. Outside of that, I might be stretching a little bit. Obviously, everything's good, but it's like, I like him that his movies are original, and he doesn't do sequels, which is the same things that I like about Tarantino and Kubrick. Original movies, no sequels. Boom, I love it. And the fact that he doesn't like to use CGI, or as little CGI as possible, makes him even more likable to me. So they used a lot of real locations here on Earth, and building sets of the spaceships and building miniatures of the spaceships. I mean, they used a crane to land the ship on the water planet, on Miller's planet, instead of having like a CGI landing. In the dust storm on the farm, they blew real dust around the farm, like with giant fans blowing dust into the actors' faces and stuff. The Tesseract, which the Tesseract is the thing in the end that Matthew McConaughey falls into. They built a giant set of the Tesseract with Murph bedrooms, with like 4 different Murph bedrooms, installed in the set behind the bookshelf and whatnot. Obviously, they used a little bit of CGI to sort of make it feel more like infinite and depth and a little wiry and crazy, but it was still the set that it was filmed on, with Matthew McConaughey just hanging from a harness. They filmed in Iceland on a glacier for that ice planet, for Man's Planet. They filmed, did I already say that? And on the water planet, on Miller's planet, they filmed in Iceland as well, on a giant lake. They planted real corn that they drove through on the farm. This is all stuff that they actually did, like the footwork on, in order to avoid CGI. Now, let's see. This was the first film shot in IMAX with handheld cameras. So obviously not the first film shot in IMAX, but what they did was Nolan hired the director of photography who holds the camera to film these things. They took an IMAX camera, which is a huge box of a camera that needs to be mounted on like a trolley system, or like a mount like on the ground, like a tripod or something, because it's too heavy for someone to hold. But this guy that he hired to hold it and film the scenes is a huge guy. Like he's like Swedish or something. He's this huge human being. So they retooled this camera and built like a shoulder mount for it, so this guy could hold it and, film scenes handheld with an IMAX camera. Because I guess IMAX cameras are just giant and much bigger than the other style. And also, for that giant cornfield on the farm, Nolan and the crew planted that. They planted 500 acre cornfield in Alberta, Canada, where the scenes at the house were shot. And after production, they sold the corn. They didn't harvest it. They sold the corn for a profit, which is kind of like everyone's most fun fact about this movie. If you're like, what's one fact that you liked about Interstellar? They'll be like, did you know that Nolan and the crew planted the corn and then sold it for a profit? I mean, and that's a great fact. The farm setting for Cooper's house and farm were inspired by Clark Kent's Midwest farm. Okay, Superman. So it was that whole set and that whole design or whatever was for some reason inspired by Clark Kent's house in the Midwest, which is odd. And there's another fact that's really odd that I discovered. There's a few things about this that when I rewatched it, the facts that I discovered, like that I didn't see anywhere after doing all this research. There's things that I noticed, and I was like, dude, maybe you are a genius. Maybe I'm a fucking genius. That I noticed that weren't anywhere else on research online, on podcasts or Reddit or whatever, is that when his son is older, Tom, and marries and has kids, his wife's name is Lois. And when I saw that in the movie, that he called his wife Lois, I was like, I wonder if that's some sort of weird Easter egg, being that like Lois Clark Kent's love interest or whatever. I'm pretty sure her name's Lois, right? And I'm like, I wonder if that has anything to do with the Superman house setting inspiration. I don't know, but why would you name her Lois? I don't know. And then another fact that's odd is that while filming that scene on Miller's planet, the water planet, in Iceland, Anne Hathaway pretty much caught hypothermia, or was like borderline hypothermic, because those suits were water tested, the space suits that they were wearing on Miller's planet, to seal and not let water through. Hers didn't seal fully and let water through, so her suit filled up with water, and it was like really cold water, so she damn near caught hypothermia. And then basically in the movie, just not a lot of green screens were used, which the actors of the movie said is really helpful, because it's hard to sort of act in front of a green screen and sort of pull that inspiration to shoot the scene when you're just in a green box and people are like, oh, there's zombies around here, or some monsters, or fucking Captain America or something. It's like, okay, and you have to sort of figure it out and deliver that scene in front of the green screen. Just not a lot of green screens in Interstellar, which is all just applause all around for Christopher Nolan. So the music and all my research and stuff like that, and now if you ask me what's some of my favorite stuff about this movie, the music really became the most organically fascinating thing for me. And it's such a cool story about the music. Okay, so when I'm talking about the music, I don't mean, it's not like a song. It's not like Martin Scorsese using like a Rolling Stone song, or, a Beatles song or something like that. The music, the score, what they call it, is the soundtrack, the score, the orchestra playing music that's sort of the bed for a lot of scenes and stuff like that. When like they're taking off or something and you hear trumpets playing or whatever. So for the music for Interstellar, for the score of the movie, Christopher Nolan used Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer is a German producer, like composer, a German composer, and he's the most well-paid composer in the world. This guy is like bulletproof rock star material. He's an absolute genius. And when you think of composers, you can't really name a lot. I always knew, in my love for Lord of the Rings when I was little, Howard Shore doing the music for that, and the music being really good, like horses charging into battle, like dun 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 dun, like the music really fueling those scenes and like really giving you goosebumps and stuff like that. But when people talk about composers for movies and stuff like that, John Williams is like the most famous one. He's sort of Steven Spielberg's go-to guy, doing the music for like Jaws or E.T. or Jurassic Park or Indiana Jones or Star Wars. All those really iconic themes that you know. Dun 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 dun. And he's like, he is icon just in that he can make those really brilliant scores for movies. But the other guy is really Hans Zimmer, and Hans Zimmer is more like Christopher Nolan's go-to guy, even though Hans Zimmer has done a ton of movies, like Gladiator, he did the score for that, Dark Knight Rises, Inception, Lion King, which he won an Oscar for, Pirates of the Caribbean, Last Samurai, Pearl Harbor, Black Hawk Down, 150 films total he's done the score for. He's composed the music for. And he like travels around the world selling out concert venues and performing with an orchestra and with like visual effects scores for his movies. And they say that in the past like 2 decades, the score for Interstellar is one of the best, and it's a lot of people's favorites. And it's really just extremely brilliant. And I listened to it a bunch. In the beginning of this show, you heard the Interstellar theme song. It was just a piano cover of it. I just tried to use a non-copyright piano cover, so it's not the actual score of the movie. But there's so much about the music in this movie that it plays like a character in the movie, 100%. It's one of the best. After actually paying attention to it and actually researching it, it's by far one of the best, compositions of music for a movie that I've ever heard, without question. Christopher Nolan and there's great stories behind it all. So Christopher Nolan wanted the music not to be specific for a genre of film. So what he did is he came to Hans Zimmer, and they obviously knew each other, and he said, "Hey Hans, if I write you just a page of a story, just a single page, will you just take one day and dedicate that day to writing a piece of music, writing a song for that story?" And Hans is like, "Sure, of course. I got time. I got money." And so Christopher Nolan didn't tell Hans anything about the movie, didn't tell him any of the science fiction stuff, no space travel. He didn't want it to be specific to a genre of film. So he wrote a short story, just a page long, about a father leaving his son to do a job that the father, didn't want to leave the son, but he had to do this job. And he included some dialogue from the Interstellar script, the dialogue basically of the scene where Murph and Cooper are saying goodbye to each other and whatever, and it's all heartbreaking. He included some dialogue of that, gave Hans Zimmer the one-page short story, and Hans Zimmer has a son, of course. He has multiple kids. He has a son. So Hans Zimmer sort of wrote the piece of music with the relationship between him and his son in mind, and he came up with the theme to Interstellar. If you YouTube Interstellar theme, that main video of it, the 12-minute extended version of the theme song, has 111 million views. It has more views than any other YouTube clip of an Interstellar-related thing. It's like really beloved, and he performs it with the orchestra at these concerts that he does and stuff like that. And it is such a crazy theme of music. It's crazy score theme song to this movie. And they got really fucking crazy detailed about it. So the theme song is 111 million views on YouTube. The comment section that I got a little lost in for a second on that theme song is like the most wholesome comment section anywhere on the internet that I've ever read. It's people being like, my girlfriend died. Listening to this gives me hope that like somehow she's still out there somewhere, and people just being like, I've never felt more alone than I do at this moment, but this theme song is making me feel like I'm connected to everybody right now, and just I wish we could all get together and listen to this theme song. It's just like a really wholesome comment section, as opposed to people just being like, "Shut up, you asshole," and stuff like that on the internet. It's something about that theme song is really just out of this world, and it's crazy that it feels out of this world. And when you listen to it, like I drove in my car 2 days ago, and I played it like really loud because I was like, I want to hear this on some decent speakers, not just my computer speakers. And it feels like really grand and like momentum, like charging into battle, or like a rocket blasting off, or it just feels like otherworldly. But he wrote it in mind with just a father leaving his son to do a job. It's just crazy, and it's just absolutely genius. So to record the theme song, they wanted to use a church organ to record the music. So they went to Temple Church in London. Temple Church was built in 1185. So you do the math on how many years ago that was. Like 900 or something. Built in 1185. The church organ was built in 1924. About 100 years ago. So the thing about organs is like large organs are so giant and so built into these old buildings that you can't like bring it to you. They couldn't just be like, bring it to LA so we can record this. It's like, no, you have to go to the organ. You can't move the organs. And so they set up mics and recording equipment in the center of the church. Christopher Nolan said he wanted a religious feel for the music, not that the movie is religious, but that the organ and the church represent mankind's effort to interpretate mystical and spiritual ideas. And Hans Zimmer can play the piano, obviously, and that's probably who they figured would play the organ to record the theme song, but they met the local organ player for the church and decided that he was the only option because in watching videos, you can watch about them like recording, there's like YouTube stuff of them recording this theme song, and the organ is actually a lot more wildly complex than I would have ever imagined. I mean, when you're sitting there on a bench playing it, you have like 4 keyboards in front of you layered on top of each other. You have a bunch of buttons on the side and knobs that you pull in and out to like send wind to different pipes in the organ. Your feet are just resting on like 30 different pedals. So you're going through like 30 different pedals with both your feet, and you're playing on 4 keyboards, and you have to do these knobs and stuff. It's like a lot more wildly complex than I ever would have thought. So they just hired the local organ player who's been playing this organ for decades for the church and just said, you got to play this for us, dude. And there's something, and they talked about how there's something very human about the organ because it requires wind and air in order to make sounds. And I don't know what you would call like a piano, if you would call it like a string instrument or just like I don't know exactly what category it would fall under. Certainly not wind, but the organ is more of like a wind instrument. So there's something very human about it. And I don't even know like where the wind is coming from. And do they have like a giant like air compressor or something? I don't understand the wind aspect of it, but it's just, you've seen those pictures of organs and they're just all these giant old pipes and stuff, and they're like built into the buildings. They like run underground and run through the walls, and it's like the whole inner workings of a giant old church that's like 1,000 years old, and an organ that's 100 years old. That's just such a unique piece of music, such a unique instrument to record music off of, I feel like. And when they hit like the low, deep notes, like boom, you can like feel the vibration and feel the windows shake, because they like cranked this fucking thing up to record this theme song. You can feel like the windows shaking and the building like filling up with air. Because the instrument's like inhaling and exhaling like a human being. So yeah, you can feel the vibration, the windows shake, because so much air is being pushed into the room. It feels very primitive and dangerous. Like, is this thing about to blow? It's perfect to contrast humans with the cosmos. They set a whole orchestra up in this church, like literally next to tombs of like dead knights. There's like in the church, there's not like pews necessarily. There's tombs of like dead knights and stuff like that. So they're just like, okay, you sit there. They set up the whole orchestra in the church. Christopher Nolan also puts a lot of attention in this movie on sound in very little ways, like accentuating the sound of a button in a spaceship being pushed with a glove, like setting up mics and stuff like that to get that little tiny detail and whatever of sound. And like, sound is just such a huge, crazy part of this movie. It's just absolutely insane. And as I was rewatching it, I realized that it's not only brilliant to know when to like hyper detail your sound, it's also brilliant to realize when no sound is needed at all. So it's like the lack of sound is also a brilliant use of sound. And there's multiple scenes where the sound just cuts and then you get silence. And I'm like, that's just brilliant in itself to know when not to use sound. Lots of shots from outside of the spaceships and stuff like that in space are just dead silent with no sound or no music. And that might have been like a Kip Thorne recommendation to be like, yeah, don't record sound in space. Just there's no sound. It's just quiet or something like that. Some shots there's music, but a lot of shots, like as soon as they lift off from space or from Earth and they're in space, you get this long few seconds or minutes of no sound at all, and it's this crazy feeling from this huge rocket blast off from Earth of just like, and the G-forces and stuff like that, to just dead. And it's like, okay, that's a brilliant use of sound. And there's other points of it too. But that theme song, the making of the theme song, it's like that's how you really become. That's a masterful filmmaker working perfectly with his masterful music composer, right? As they're flying to London together, they're doing all this stuff. They're posted up in this church. They're focused on they're detail oriented, right? They're not just phoning it in. They're not like, let's just do this on a computer. We can make organ sounds on a computer. Why wouldn't you just do that? It's cheaper and it's easier. It's quicker. No, you got to get the analog. You got to get the fucking real thing. All right, let's get into the movie. That was sort of all the backstory notes that I had. Okay, so let's get into the movie. Boy, it's getting warm in here, and I have paused multiple times to answer text messages. Okay, let's get into the movie. So, opening title, with dust falling on a shuttle toy, like a space shuttle toy, on the bookshelf. Dun, dun, dun. Coop wakes up to Murph telling him that there's a ghost in her room, and you see interviews with people about dust. And these are actual interviews from a documentary about the Dust Bowl in the 1930s in the United States. Don't know much about the Dust Bowl in the 1930s in the United States. The public school system that I went through, I don't remember about it at all. If we covered it, maybe I missed that day. But the interviews you see multiple times in this movie with old people talking about the Dust Bowl is actual footage from the Dust Bowl in the 1930s that Christopher Nolan called up the documentary filmmaker or whatever and said, can I use these in Interstellar? And the documentary filmmaker said, sure. So that's kind of cool that those aren't like actors or anything. Those are real people talking about real events. And there's a whole dust theme throughout Interstellar. I don't know if it's too much to look into, but every shot on Earth, basically, and for the first 45 minutes of the movie, there's dust everywhere, and they're going through dust storms and stuff, obviously. I mean, but that opening shot of dust being like sprinkled on that space shuttle, and then the dust storms that they get caught in, and the dad sweeping the dust off the front porch. And I noticed that when Coop goes into his daughter's school for parent-teacher conference or whatever, the tabletops, and that's one thing I noticed that nobody else mentioned, the tabletops are all just covered in dust. Like, nobody's taking the time to even wipe it up. Probably because it just keeps coming and coming more, that they're just like, fuck it, we're not going to wipe it up anymore. But throughout Coop and Murph's whole house or whatever, there's just dust everywhere. And obviously that the message that the ghost sends in the first place is those binary readings in dust on the floor. And the dust thing is like, maybe it's because, we all come from stardust, that we wouldn't be here without planets that have exploded and the stardust that creates us. Maybe it's because, like, eventually we all turn into dust, and once they get into space, there's no more dust they have to deal with. So it's all really just confined to the planet Earth. And I think it's kind of just like the planet's gonna turn into dust, and everybody on it. So there's a lot of dust themes in the beginning, and like whenever the trucks, even when the truck's driving through the cornfield and stuff, there's just dust behind it. There's like dust everywhere. We meet John Lithgow, who plays Coop's dad. Who's just a fantastic actor, and he plays a fantastic role in this movie. Legend, just beyond legend. He played, obviously, that Lord Farquaad in the Shrek movies. It's like his smallest role he's ever done, but that's just my first John Lithgow experience. Mackenzie Foy, which plays Murph, the young Murph, and apparently Mackenzie Foy, she was about 14 when this was shot. I believe Murph is 10 years old in the movie, though, and she apparently was in the Twilight movies as well. And then Tom, Murph's son, who's played by Timothée Chalamet. Now, Timothée Chalamet, this is how this cast sort of gets more star-studded as time goes on, is because all the kids of today are basically like, Timothée Chalamet is like a god to them. In the new Dune movie, he's like the star of the new Dune movie that's coming out soon. I don't know exactly why he's became like the hot new young actor. I mean, I'm not too sure of where that came from, but he is. So he's like, you could sell a movie right now just in the fact that Timothy Chalamet's in it. Like, he's like the biggest thing right now is like Timothy Chalamet, and he plays like Tom, Coop's son, in this movie, and he does a great job. I just can't answer the question of where all the hype has came from for him, but I know that the hype is magnificent. It's like he's like the hottest thing ever, apparently. So John Lithgow plays the dad, Timothy Chalamet the son, Mackenzie Foy the daughter. And you get the sense in these first 45 minutes of the movie that Murph and Coop are basically two sides of the same coin. They're a lot more alike than Coop and his son Tom. His son Tom is all set up to be a farmer, to be prepped to be a farmer, when Murph is not, and Murph is a lot more scientific, stubborn, curious, just like Coop. When she thinks there's a ghost in her room telling her things, she's not scared of it. She wants to analyze it and study it, right? She is fascinated by... She wants to look up to the sky and ask questions, when the son Tom wants to look down at the ground and be a farmer, basically. That's the difference between the two. But Murph and Coop are like they seem like they're best friends for one, and like partners in crime, and they're very similar. And you learn that the mom died, and maybe Tom, the son, was more like the mom. I don't know. But that's sort of how the whole dynamic is between all of them. She also, when you see old Murph, not super old, but like middle-aged Murph, she wears the same jacket that her dad wore. So like they wear like the exact same clothes. And that's a fun fact that I didn't notice when I first saw these movies until I did the research. Like, oh, she's wearing his jacket. So they're on the way to school. They spot a drone flying. They drive through the cornfield. The Interstellar theme starts playing. I think the Interstellar theme might have been playing in the beginning. I can't remember, but it starts playing when they're driving through the cornfield. And I noticed throughout the whole movie, like when that Interstellar theme song played, that brilliant Hans Zimmer composed. And how they filmed this scene when they're driving through the fields, is that there's stuntmen driving the truck. When it's like a wide shot of the truck, it's a stuntman driving. And when it's an interior shot of the truck of the three characters, the dad, the son, and the daughter, they rigged the truck so the driver was sitting on top of the truck, driving the truck in like this rig out that they did. So Matthew McConaughey is not actually driving through the field. There's like a guy sitting on the hood, on the roof of the truck driving. Kind of interesting. No CGI, obviously. And then they just they hack into this drone and hijack the guts out of it, the battery or whatever, because he's going to put it into a combine to farm, because this drone is just an old Air Force drone that's not doing anything anymore. So they just fucking land the drone, rip the battery out, and they're like, I'm just going to use this for an actual purpose. It needs to adapt just like the rest of us. He goes to the school to drop them off and has a meeting with the teachers. The table's covered with dust, like I pointed out. Colette Wolfe plays one of the teachers, who's, not well known, but she's just a very attractive, cute actress, just as a side note there. And I think in that meeting, Coop reveals that his wife died. That's just what I put in my notes. So Murph goes back home with him, because apparently she's suspended from school. So she goes back home with Coop and starts talking about the ghost more, and showing Coop that the ghost has punched books. Well, now I say punched. That books have fell off of her bookshelf in her room, and that she's analyzing the gaps in the bookshelf as Morse code. Because she's just not scared of the ghost. Like any other kid would be scared of the ghost. She just wants to study it. So she's analyzing the missing books as Morse code. During a dust storm, they get caught in. And she left her window open, so her room is filled with dust. And they see markings on the floor compiled of dust. And Coop, after sitting down and staring at these markings on the floor, he realized it's binary code, not Morse code. Binary code like 0101. The binary code is Morse code. What? He realizes it's binary code, and that the binary code is giving them coordinates. And apparently in this movie, we're dealing with the grandfather paradox, which I understand what the grandfather paradox is. I've known it for a while. I had trouble wrapping my mind around how the grandfather paradox is in this movie, but I guess it makes sense if you don't try to think about it too much. But the grandfather paradox is that if you went back in time and killed your grandfather before he had a son, then you wouldn't exist to go back in time to kill him, if that makes sense. So, like, your grandfather has a son who has you, and then you go back in time to kill your grandfather before he has the son, you would have never existed to go back in time and kill him, and it's all just like a complete loop that fucks with your head. But in this movie, that's what we're dealing with, is a grandfather paradox where, like, which that's what I had trouble wrapping my mind around, was like, if he didn't tell himself to go on the journey, then he wouldn't have gone, and it's like that whole circle again. So it's like he delivered these coordinates to himself, but like if he didn't go to deliver the coordinates, like it's somehow that's the whole thing is a grandfather paradox. And while they're sort of investigating this ghost and stuff, and like walking around the house in these early stages, in that farmhouse, it's very like horror film vibes. Like if you went into this movie not knowing anything about it and you just started it, you'd be like, this is kind of like a horror film, and there's actually a ghost in this house. Like this house is haunted, and the music is just very horror film like. Even as the film goes on, even in the end, in the Tesseract, and even in the whole thing, like the music is very like horror filmy. There's a lot of I just got that vibe. I just wrote that down because I got that vibe when they're like walking around that house and it's dark or something in the early stages of this movie. The music is like very dark and creepy. And in this movie, Nolan's not showing you the rules of the movie right away. And that's a good note because like in a lot of movies, like in Inception or a Tenet even, in the movie Tenet, like it starts out right away with like some weird crazy shit. In the movie Inception, I think it does too. In a lot of movies, like maybe The Matrix or something, it's sort of, let's tell the audience the rules of the movie that we're dealing with right off the bat so that they know what the hell we're talking about. In this movie, like the movie unfolds as it goes. You don't understand how far, like from this little farm that we're dealing with on Earth to where we're going to end in the movie. Like it's this inconceivable, like giant stretch. And the movie doesn't tell you the rules, like with gravity using as a communication method. It doesn't it's not telling you all that. There's no big opening scene. It's just like unfolds as it goes, and it unfolds kind of slowly and sort of takes its time. So those coordinates that they found on the floor in the dust, the binary code, Murph and Coop both go to find those coordinates, and they find like what seems like some old abandoned military base, and they get basically captured. That's where we meet Tars, who's a robot, and Nolan said he didn't want Tars to be anthropomorphic, which means like humans. So he didn't want like a C-3PO or like an iRobot robot, like with a face and arms and legs. He didn't want them to be anthropomorphic. For some reason, he didn't want them to be human in that aesthetic. He wanted them to look differently, so they came up with this different idea for a robot that's kind of like block-like. So we meet Tars, and we meet Dr. Brand and Hathaway. Immediately right off the bat, Dr. Brand and Coop are not very friendly with each other. She is very arrogant, and he's kind of... He's just like, well, whatever. He's just kind of like trying to brush her off, and they're just not very friendly at all. That's when we meet her dad, Professor Brand, who's played by Michael Caine, the absolute saint of a human being, Michael Caine. Apparently, Michael Caine's been in 6 different Christopher Nolan movies, so they're good friends. He was the butler in the Batman movies. The name of the butler is escaping me at the moment. The name of the butler is escaping me at the moment, but Michael Caine's been in 6 different Christopher Nolan movies, and he's just an absolute saint of a human being. You love him to death. We meet Doyle, who is played by Wes Bentley, And I love Wes Bentley, not because I think he's really that amazing, but I think he is pretty amazing. He plays the weird kid in American Beauty, which I love that movie American Beauty, and he plays the weird kid in that movie who likes to film the naked girl across the street out of his window. He plays that weird role, but like a really good role. And I actually was reintroduced to him again when I just watched the TV show Yellowstone, and he plays Jamie in Yellowstone. He plays Kevin Costner's kid. So it's really fantastic whenever I see him like pop up in movies like that, and I'm like, oh fuck, that's the guy. That's the kid from American Beauty. And so he plays Doyle in this, and then what the fuck? Oh, Romley, and then we're introduced to Romley, who's played by David Gyasi. As well, all in this. These guys are all NASA, so this is a NASA base that they stumbled across because NASA's become like an underground society at this point. Like they've just moved underground and they're still trying to continue to do their research and stuff like that. But obviously, the world doesn't think NASA's a priority anymore, which we've kind of gotten away from already in 2021. So now they have to do their research and their work underground and stuff because the world needs farmers, not engineers. So they've stumbled into this whole NASA underground society of Dr. Brand, Professor Brand, Doyle, and Romley, and TARS, the robot. They show Coop a rocket, and the Interstellar theme plays again during that. Professor Brand is explaining that wheat died out, okra died out, and all that's left pretty much on Earth to eat is corn. And eventually corn will die out too. And that the Earth is losing oxygen. He says the last people to starve will be the first people to suffocate. So he's kind of giving the audience a rundown on the state of the planet. And he talks about the Lazarus mission, which was a mission where they sent, 10 years ago, they sent out, I believe, 12 astronauts, each to different planets that they hope would habit life. And there was no return trip or anything like that. They sent these 12 astronauts out, the Lazarus mission, and said, you relay information back to us if your planet can habitate life or not. So he's telling Coop about that mission. Professor Brand wants Coop to go and find the astronauts who relayed the good info on planets that were habitable. And out of 12, 3 astronauts did. That would be Miller's planet, Edmund's planet, and Mann's planet. And this is all through a wormhole that is near Saturn, and the wormhole is called Gargantua. So he's like, Coop, you're a great pilot. He says, like, you're the best we ever had. And nobody can figure out. They're asking him, like, how did you find this base? And he's like, don't worry about it, or something like that. And they're all like, okay. It seems like they don't know how he got there, and he doesn't even know why he got there, because he's not going to tell them a ghost told me. He didn't sound like a fucking crazy person, or he's like, I don't know. But they're like, now that you're here, we weren't planning on you coming here. We were planning on just signing up some jerk-off pilot, but now that you're here and you're a great pilot, we want you to go on this mission to save the planet. And through that whole time, I don't know why. Oh, yeah. So the plan A is to save the planet. Plan B is a population bomb on a new planet to save the species. Professor Brand is working on an equation dealing with gravity, a gravity equation to save the planet for Plan A, but it's not complete yet. And he tells Coop, you have my word, I'll complete the equation before you get back so that Plan A works and that we can save the planet. Coop very much has his family in mind and the people on Earth, as opposed to Dr. Brand, whose main true goal is to save the human species. Brand always talks about humans as a species, and his goal is to save the species. And Coop's goal throughout the whole thing is to save his family and to save the people on Earth. So you have Plan A, Plan B. Plan A, save the people on Earth. Plan B, population bomb on a new planet to start a new colony and save the species. But this whole time, Dr. Brand is being very aloof and sort of lying. He's lying straight to Coop's face, which I guess we don't know on our first watch, and we only know as the movie goes on that he's lying to him, and Plan A is never his intention at all. He knows for a fact almost that Plan A won't work, but he's lying to Coop, and he's being really deceitful, and he's telling him, about his daughter and about humanity on Earth to get Coop to agree to go. And it's really fucked up, and it's actually really shitty. And he's giving up his humanity because it's immoral to do that. You're sending a man on a suicide mission under false pretenses. It's immoral to do that, but he's making that own sacrifice within himself of his morals in order to save the species, because he wants to save the species. And he needs Coop to take a ship with the population bomb to one of these three options of a habitable planet to save the species. He knows that there's no way to save the people on Earth. But Coop's goal throughout the whole movie is to get back to his daughter and to save the human beings on Earth. And Brand is just playing very much on hope when convincing Coop. And then Murph is in. He's gonna go, and there's the goodbye scene with Murph in her bedroom, where she's very upset. She doesn't want him to go. She's losing her best friend. She's losing her dad. And she's like, when are you going to come back? When are you going to come back? Like, she knows it's going to be a long time before he comes back. But then she understands he doesn't know when he's going to come back. And that's when she really can't accept it. And she's just like, she's pissed and she's sad. And he's sad. And it's a really crazy scene. And that young actress, Mackenzie Foy, was it? Does a really great job as the young Murph. Mackenzie Foy, yeah. It's just, and he says the line in that bedroom. He says that his wife, he's like, your mom said to me when you kids were born, she says that once you're a parent, you're the ghost of your kid's future. And that's something I didn't catch until this time when I'm like, oh, that's just foreshadowing in that he's the ghost that's been communicating those messages. He says, once you're a parent, you're the ghost of your kid's future. That's crazy, right? That's just crazy. So Murph says, then she says to him, she's like, you know what? I cracked the code on the bookshelf. Look at the spaces, Dad. The code in Morse code says the word stay, S-T-A-Y. And he just brushes that off. He gives her a watch. They synchronize their watches. He's like, once I get back, we might even be the same age, since time's going to be going slower for me. Going up there, going through a goddamn black hole. He's like, time's going to be going slower for me, but maybe when I get back, we'll be the same age. But then she's like, you don't know when you're coming back, do you? And then she just loses it, and they just both can't deal. And it's really fucked up and sad. And then he drives off. He fucking goes. Gives the kid his truck, gives the son his truck, says, Dad, take care of everything for me. But he's like, he knows that this is his responsibility. I think he feels the responsibility of the whole thing. He's not happy about it. I think he feels he's like, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to get back. I'm going to go. I'm going to fucking figure this out and I'm going to get back quick. And it's all going to be okay, right? He's like in work mode already. He's like, I'm going to go. I'm going to be good on. I'll be back. That's what he's saying in his mind. He's like, I'm going to get back ASAP. Little does he know, it's going to be a lot longer than he thinks. So then they're in space. And they dock to the Endurance, which is this giant fucking space station or whatever, but it's more than a space station. It's actually kind of a ship that's already in orbit. And they dock to the Endurance, and they meet Case, which is another sort of TARS robot. So now you have TARS and Case. Case was already on that space station / ship. And you have the crew is Coop and Dr. Brand, and Doyle and Romley and TARS and Case. That's your crew. So they go up there and dock, and they got to head towards Saturn because that's where the wormhole is. Saturn's 2 years away, so they're going to go into that cryo sleep or whatever for 2 years. And they discuss, him and Dr. Brand discuss, you have Miller's planet, Edmund's planet, and Mann's planet. Those are the three astronauts that went up in the Lazarus missions and sent back signals saying, I made it to a planet that's habitable. So you have those three. So they have to visit three. They have to pick, like, which one's first, which one's second, which one's third. Which ones are we going to go to? Which is crazy, a crazy, like, roulette, fucking Russian roulette lottery that has to be played. Miller's, Edmunds, and Mann's. and we're introduced to this system where the astronauts on board can record messages to send back to Earth. People on Earth can record messages to send to this crew. So McConaughey or Coop is receiving messages like from his son and his dad. Murph doesn't want to talk to him. She's pissed. And you're getting messages from Professor Brand talking to his daughter and talking to the crew. And we're introduced to that system, which plays a significant role, an underlying role throughout the whole movie. And they go into the cryo sleep or whatever. They wake up, and I guess when they wake up, 2 years later, when they're at Saturn, that's when you're introduced to that message system. And then they go through the wormhole, which is not as bad as you would think it is. In that first journey through the wormhole, it's not that bad. From what you think it'd be. You think it'd kill you, but I guess it doesn't kill you. And Miller's planet is the first stop. Miller's planet, once they're through the wormhole, is the closest to the wormhole, and that plays into why gravity on Miller's planet and time on Miller's planet is so different. God damn, a lot of talking. It is so different as opposed to Earth. Miller's planet is first, and they have a discussion regarding time on Miller's planet and relativity or whatever, saying that gravity slows their time down, making 1 hour on Miller's planet 7 years on Earth. That's the equation that we're given. Well, we're on Miller's planet, which is the water planet with the waves. 1 hour is equal to 7 years on Earth because of how close it is to the wormhole. So Miller's planet is all water. As stated in the movie, and this is some internet Easter eggs that have been found. This is just absolutely brilliant. And there's two, I feel like, iconic scenes in this movie, like truly iconic scenes that if you asked, what are the most iconic, breathtaking, incredible sequences of this movie, I'd say Miller's Planet is the first one, and the docking sequence is the second one. Miller's Planet is like a movie within a movie. You could just show someone like the 15-minute piece of the movie of Miller's Planet, and it'd be like it'd be like them watching a whole movie. It's like a movie within a movie. But as stated in the movie, a 1 hour on Miller's Planet equals 7 years on Earth. So the internet actually did the math. People on Reddit did the math and found out that I don't have the whole goddamn equation they did, but they found out that 1 second equals 1 day on Miller's Planet. So what Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer, the guy who did the music, did is they put an Easter egg in the movie to where the music playing on Miller's Planet has a tick, 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 and it's 60 beats per minute. You can count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's this ticking. There's this ticking that's playing in the music while they're on Miller's Planet, and once you know that, it's a lot more anxiety-inducing when you watch that scene. I didn't know that, obviously, until I just watched it today, and it's crazy to think about that every second on Miller's Planet is a day on Earth. And that was an Easter egg that Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer put in, saying, like, whatever song we're making for Miller's Planet, I believe the song is called Mountains, I want this 60 beat per minute tick, because that's just how the math equaled out to 1 day on Earth. Which is an absolutely insane fucking fact. And when you watch the movie again and you listen to that, you're like, holy shit. But 60 beats per minute, 1 day on Earth. So when they land on Miller's Planet, they're looking for this beacon. The beacon that the astronaut Miller, who landed there, was relaying information on, because they want data. They see the waves, or they find the downed beacon or whatever, and they're like, maybe it's over those mountains. Those aren't mountains, those are waves. And you see this giant goddamn 300-foot wave coming towards them, and they're standing in like a lake. It looks like a lake, but it's a goddamn water planet, which is like my worst fear. But they're standing, it's only like a foot or two of water, so they're like walking on it, and they landed on it. But then you see this giant wave coming, this 300-foot wave. They see the wave. Anne Hathaway's character, Dr. Brand, wastes a shitload of time trying to go capture this beacon, and Doyle ends up dying. He doesn't get back into the ship quick enough. And then they discover, or either they discover or the internet discovered, waves come every 45 minutes, and they actually experienced 2 waves on this planet. They were on Miller's planet for 3 hours in total, which it doesn't seem like that because it's only like a 15-minute sequence, but just in the script, in the way that it plays out, they were there for 3 hours. You kind of just have to suspend disbelief because they said 1 hour on Miller's planet is 7 years, and it turns out that they were there for 23 years, so it equals out to about a little over 3 hours. They were there for 3 hours. So a wave comes, they survive the wave, at least 2 of them after Doyle dies. Like, they just ride over the wave, which is incredible, and then they have to wait for the engines to drain water, and which ends up just having to wait for the next wave. And with the weirdness of the time on this planet, how one fucking second is a day on Earth, and that astronaut landed 10 years ago to relay that information, they realized that astronaut probably landed on that planet like right before they showed up, which is a real crazy thing to think about too. As soon as they get the ship going and get off of Miller's planet, you really start to recognize how much of a failure Miller's planet was. And it was an absolute, complete failure in every aspect going down to Miller's planet. And it's kind of what feels like the first failure of their mission. And Matthew and Coop even says, he's like, we don't know what we're dealing with. We're in over our heads. We have about as much experience as a Boy Scout troop or whatever. We are way over our heads in this shit because of how much time was lost. Decades were lost. And it was just a huge wake-up call for this whole fucked up mission. As soon as they get back to the ship, the video messages really relay the real cost of the mistake made on Miller's planet. Like, her running to that beacon for the data was a giant waste. As soon as you realize that there's a giant fucking 300-foot wave coming and that all you see is water, you should recognize that this planet is not habitable. Why run and waste another more time for the data? And when I was watching it, if she didn't do that and they were able to take off before that wave, they probably could have saved decades of time. But for some reason, she felt like she needed to go get that beacon for the data or whatever. Like, just a giant mistake. Even everything about it was a huge mistake. And the messages really show how much of a mistake it was. They were on Miller's planet for 23 years, and when they open the doors, when they're back to the ship and they see Romley as an old man, you're just like, holy shit. And he plays such a good role in this movie, but you see that he's now 23 years older than he was when they left, like hours ago when they left. And you're just like, oh my God, he's been waiting for us for 23 years. What does a guy look like who's been up there alone for 23 years? It's like a prison sentence. If he would have known that or whatever, he probably would have just offed himself or just went to the next planet. Like, go to the next planet or something. But it's like, he just waited for them to come back. And it just sounds awful. And that's like the first sign of, oh my God, this was a huge waste. This was a huge mistake. But the messages that they received, because Coop just goes beelines for the messages and presses play, and it's like 23 years of messages have been stored. And he's like, start from the beginning. And then the messages start to play of his son Tom, who we see is Casey Affleck, is playing the older Tom. Casey Affleck, Ben Affleck's little brother, who's a incredible filmmaker as a director and an actor in the movie Gone Baby Gone and Manchester by the Sea, who's great in, I believe he directed Gone Baby Gone. I could be wrong about that. I think he might have directed it and been in it. But that's a great movie, and Manchester by the Sea is a great movie I love as well. He was also in all the Ocean 11 movies. We see Casey Affleck plays Tom as an older guy, and when you see sort of the transition in the messages from Timothée Chalamet as young Tom to Casey Affleck as old Tom, they actually look a lot alike, and it was a brilliant thing to put those two together because they could have their own fucking movie where they play this like a son and a father because they're very similar. And I just love Casey Affleck. I think he's a fantastic actor and filmmaker. But he's playing Tom. I think the dad says a thing or two, and then Casey Affleck, Tom says, Grandpa died, and when he's reading these messages or watching these messages, Christopher Nolan keeps the camera on Matthew McConaughey for a lot of it, which is really like gut wrenching and sad, and really it's just a great scene. It's a great scene done by Matthew McConaughey, and it's just so sad. And it's like it's never been something that you've seen before. When have you seen a guy watch 23 years worth of messages from his family? It'd be like if your life just stopped right now, and then you had to watch recorded messages from your family for the next 23 years. Like, hey, Dad, I had a kid, or I met this girl, or whatever. And it's like a life that he didn't get, the life that he could have experienced with his kids that he didn't get to, and it was all just in a few hours of his life that happened. It's just so hard to even imagine. It's so sad. And then after Tom, the son, gets done recording a few messages, I think he's like, so-and-so said I have to let you go, so like I'm going to let you go, Dad, because I don't think you're out there anymore. I think these messages are just going into nothing. So, so long for now. And then the screen goes black, and that's another point of when using the art of not using sound is when the screen goes black after Tom disappears off of it. As Tom's talking, the Interstellar theme is playing, I believe, or some sort of music is playing, and then as soon as the screen goes black, the music stops, and it's dead quiet. And then onto the screen comes Murph as a grown woman, and you're like, oh, holy fuck, dude. And it's like she actually is recording a message for him, and it's Jessica Chastain. Jessica Chastain's the actress that plays the middle-aged Murph. Jessica Chastain, who I think the internet is really in love with right now for some reason, but as far as where I would regard her as an actress, I wasn't aware of how like beautiful she is. Even after seeing this movie, since she plays more of a rugged tomboy role, Jessica Chastain is fucking gorgeous. But Jessica Chastain, middle-aged Murph, comes on the screen to say her message, and it's just like, I remember the first time I saw it, the screen went black, and you're like, damn, that was crazy, and then boom, and you're like, oh my god, and she's like, I decided to record a message for you on this day. It's my birthday, but it's not just any birthday. Today I turn as old as you were when you left me, and you said you'd be back when you were this old. And you're just like, oh my god, dude. And she is still, you can see she is just full of resentment for him and pissed at him for doing what he fucking did. And it's just insane. And then as she stops recording the message, then it goes to her on Earth, and you can see that she's hanging out with Professor Brand in that underground NASA base, and that she's now working towards the same cause because she's like her dad, because she's just like him. She couldn't resist it. She's now working with Professor Brand. It shows that they're kind of buddies as well. They're having lunch together, and they're in his office doing equations on the blackboard, going over, still trying to find this goddamn gravity equation that he still hasn't been able to figure out to save the planet. And then while Coop and Dr. Brand and Romley are back on the ship, they're now discussing that Edmund's planet and Man's planet still need to be visited. Because I'm guessing Miller's planet was like the first stop through the wormhole, and then Man's and Edmund's are further out than that. So they were just going. They've been battling time this whole film up until now. Like, time has been the main enemy of the film, so they probably just went to their first option in hopes that maybe that's the one. Which makes sense. You have nothing else to go off of. You're only going off of, we have these three options, so why not just go to the first one first? In retrospect, they shouldn't have. But they're discussing Edmund's planet and Man's planet still need to be visited. the data that they're getting from both of these planets, Edmund's data is more promising, but stopped a while back. So I think they're like, he's probably dead. But his data is more promising on it being a habitable planet. Man's data is still transmitting. So they think man might be still alive. But his data is only saying, come here, come here, come here. He's not sending any actual data on the planet, like oxygen levels or life or anything like that. Man is only sending, come here, come here, come here, when Edmund's planet is actually sending data. And it's a better option. Honestly, Edmund's planet is a better option. So, but they have a discussion about which one they're going to go to. This is when, and earlier as soon as they left Earth, Coop had suspected that through just talking to Dr. Brand that there was something between her and Edmund, the guy who had went up 10 years ago, but it wasn't confirmed really. He tried to confirm it, but it wasn't like truly confirmed, but he's got a suspicion. So they're like, where do we go first, man's planet or Edmund's planet? They're like, we don't have enough fuel since the goddamn space station has been up there for 23 years because of the Miller's planet mistake. We don't have enough fuel to go to both of these planets and then go home. We only have enough fuel to go to one of these planets and go home. We don't have enough. If we go to one planet and it's a mistake, then we'll have to make a decision whether to go home or to go to the next planet and drop the population bomb. That's the whole discussion that they have at that point, which is crazy. But in their conversation of which do we go to, man's planet or Edmund's planet, Dr. Brand, Anne Hathaway, says we should go to Edmund's planet because his data is more promising. And then Matthew McConaughey, Coop, says, I think that you're biased, and I think your judgment's being clouded because I know that you're in love with Edmonds. And they have a conversation basically about love, and she has a lot of lines where she's saying maybe love is something that's in this situation, maybe love is actually guiding our decision right now. Maybe somehow my love for Edmonds is a sign that that's where we should go. And he's saying like more on a more logical scale, that doesn't make you right about the planet. That it could make you just as wrong. And she says, all right. And she's pissed, and she's like, maybe you're just punishing me for Miller's planet for the fuck up there when she went fucking swimming for a goddamn beacon when they should have gotten the hell out of there. She's like, maybe you're just punishing me. She's like, but if we go to man's planet and it's a failure, you're going to have to make a decision on whether you want to go to your family or you want to save the species. Hopefully you'll be more objective about that decision than you are being about this one, or something along those lines. And Coop basically makes the call as the pilot of this ship. We're going to man's planet because he's still communicating. And he's kind of, look, with her giving the whole thing about love, maybe love is guiding us to Edmund's planet. He's kind of like, no, I'm not going off of that crazy talk you're doing, lady. Anne Hathaway. Didn't you just play Catwoman a few years ago? He's like, your judgment's all fucked up because you love this guy. We're going to man's planet because he's still communicating. And Edmonds is probably dead. So Coop makes that call. We're going to Dr. Man's planet. Then we go back to Professor Brand is on his deathbed because he's old as hell now. And we meet Getty, the character named Getty, who's played by Topher Grace, who's kind of like not a giant character in this movie. He is kind of just in it, and he's hanging out with Murph, and they kiss at one point. And he goes back to the house with her later to get her watch. But Topher Grace, kind of a nice little cameo, if you want to call it. Kind of a nice small little role in this movie. Who's been in a lot of movies. He was actually in one of the Ocean's movies as well with Casey Affleck. So we see him. He's working with Murph. And Professor Brandon on his deathbed, where he has this deathbed confession to Murph about that he lied. And he basically spills the beans and says, I lied to your dad. I've lied about this whole thing. I've lied to you. Plan A is not an option. It's just not, it's impossible. You need to solve this gravity equation to save Earth. You need numbers that we can't get. You need data that we can't get because the data is inside the wormhole and you can't transmit the data outside from the wormhole. That's the whole thing. And so he's like, we've been working on this for decades, and I knew we weren't going to figure it out. And I knew it was all a lie. The only way to get this crew to go, the only way to get all these astronauts to go is to lie to them and tell them that there's hope for the people on Earth. When he knew it's only plan B. It was only plan B all along with him to save the species. He was just all about saving the species. So he tells her that on his deathbed. And then that plan A was just never the option. So then back up in space, we're going down into man's planet, which is a planet where in I guess in the movie this is where they took sort of the most liberty with science, where this is the most probably unlikely part of this whole movie that this planet would exist because the whole idea of the planet is that the clouds froze. So as they're going down, like they hit a corner of a cloud and like chip some ice off of it, and they're like frozen clouds. And then they land basically on frozen clouds, and they're talking about like what's on the base of the planet, like the actual planet, not the frozen clouds. But I guess it's actually scientifically the clouds aren't going to freeze like that because they're just the gas of those clouds aren't going to freeze and have something that you can walk on and set a plane down on and hang out on. So of this whole movie, the most liberty that was taken with science is man's planet, and that it's frozen clouds basically. But this is where they went to Iceland and shot on a glacier, man's planet, and the whole thing shot on a glacier. And in Iceland, I guess before they shot, there was locally there was a volcano that erupted, and which sort of covered this glacier in ashes, which gives it this whole crazy feeling as Coop and Dr. Mann and Dr. Brandt and whatever are walking around on this planet. It's just this, it doesn't feel like it's somewhere on Earth, but it actually is. It's actually filmed on Earth on a glacier in Iceland. And then they find the base that the astronaut Dr. Mann set up on this planet. They land, they go in, he's in that long sleep cryo chamber, deep sleep thing, and they open it up and they unzip him, and you have the Matt Damon reveal, which nobody knew in the whole marketing of this movie, in the whole production of this movie. Matt Damon was hidden from the whole thing, so nobody knew Matt Damon was in this movie. And I was even seeing things of people when they saw it in the theater, like screaming out in the theater, like, "Oh my God, like that's Matt Damon!" And because nobody knew he was in the movie, because if you knew he was in the movie, it would have spoiled the plot, and you would have been like waiting for him. You would have been like waiting, like when's Matt Damon coming? And then as they're like going down to find Dr. Mann, who's still communicating, you would have been like, oh, it's gonna be Matt Damon. But like nobody knew. And so it was like this big reveal, this big Easter egg. Like he's not in any of the credits or whatever. It's maybe he's in the credits, but he's like kept out of the trailer, kept out of the marketing. Like it was a top secret thing, which is interesting, and it's a cool thing that was done. So you have this whole Matt Damon reveal, and he's been alone on this planet for 10 years. He starts telling them, they're like, Dr. Mann, tell us about your world, and he's like, our world, hopefully. And he says the days are 67 hours long and the nights are 67 hours long and cold. And he's telling them about the planet, and he's kind of telling them he's definitely telling them what they want to hear. But there's something really off and weird about him. And he's telling them, he's like, I sent probes down to the base or down to the floor of the planet, and they gave back readings of life and, breathable air, and he's like, I've done 7 missions, with my TARS robot. He has like a quote-unquote TARS robot that he disassembled. So you see this like TARS robot, like Coop and Dr. Brand have, but he's disassembled and he's all in pieces. And he's like, I had to disassemble TARS to use his power supply for, the base to keep the mission alive. And then Coop and Dr. Brand's TARS is like, I'm going to reassemble the robot. And he's like, okay, if you want. And he's telling them things that they want to hear. But as they're looking around this planet and kind of getting the whole vibe of everything, it's like, this is off. This is just, it's not aligning with the things he says, how this is the perfect, place. It doesn't seem like it. You're talking about 67-hour days, 67-hour nights, and for like cold and like ammonia in the air. But apparently the floor of the planet is good or something. Like, it just seems off and weird. Then they get a message while they're in there hanging out with Dr. Mann about, from Murph. They get a message from Murph, a recorded message saying, Dr. Brand, I'm sorry, but your father passed away. And then she's like, did you know? Did you know there was no plan A? Did my dad know? Did my dad know he was leaving us to die on this planet? And it definitely seems like Dr. Brand didn't know, and Coop definitely didn't know. But then Mann says, yeah, I knew. And he's like, yeah, I knew that, the main goal was to save the species and not to, save the people on Earth. So Dr. Mann knew about it, I guess. And Dr. Mann says, and Romley confirms, he says, you need data from inside the black hole to complete the equation, and there's no way to record or relay that data inside the black hole. And, Mann's whole just weird demeanor. He's just weird and he's off. And it's weird because Matt Damon usually plays like more of the heroic role, but in this movie he's playing like a cowardly, selfish asshole. And him and Coop go on a walk to find some sort of data beacon or I forget what they're going for, some like satellite base or something, some like other camp. And Coop's like, yeah, show it to me. And Mann's talking this whole time about, just crazy stuff, how this planet's the best and how everything's going to work out great. And then he starts saying, like, I don't know, I thought I wasn't going to be afraid to die or whatever. He's like, in all honesty with you, I never considered the possibility that my planet wasn't the one. And you're just like, wait, what? And it's like, he never considered the possibility that his planet wasn't the one. So he's like, so you're thinking like, what is up with this fucking guy, dude? Like, what do you mean that you never considered the possibility that your planet wasn't the one? Like, and it's becoming more and more clear that this planet's not going to work, yo. And that he was just sending the messages out to be rescued. And that, because he's scared and he doesn't want to die. He faked all the data. And a lot of people said that, and I think so too, that his name is Mann for a reason. And that he's really representing a bad side of humanity. A bad side of all of us, where he's just being extremely selfish and cowardly. And the fact that he did that, the fact that he sent out the data saying this planet's good when it's not good. And, he attacks Coop, and they fight, and they have a fight, and Coop's, helmet gets broken, and he's suffocating because of how shitty this planet is, and Dr. Mann's, talking to him the whole time, and, talking, do you see your kids? Can you see your kids? You're struggling to survive, and, all this stuff. I'm sorry, I can't watch you go through this. I thought I could, but I couldn't, while, Coop is, suffocating to death, and, while Coop is suffocating, and Dr. Mann sort of becomes in this film the first enemy that we see as in a human form. Up until this point, the enemy has really been time, but Dr. Mann is like, oh, this is a bad guy. We got to fight this bad guy. This is not a good person. The movie finally has conflict involving another human being, and at the same time, it's showing Romley reactivating Mann's TARS robot, and Romley is seeing all this data is fucked up, and this Mann's guy obviously disassembled his TARS robot so that the TARS robot couldn't communicate data, or couldn't be hacked into to see the actual data. He tore this robot apart because he knew that his planet's data was all fucked up, and he just sent back a signal saying come here because he wanted to be saved because he's a coward and doesn't want to die alone. and then the robot destructs, killing Romney. Boom, explodes. Dr. Brand then saves Coop from suffocating. They're flying off the planet. Dr. Mann is ahead of them, flying towards the Endurance. He's trying to escape and get on this Endurance and leave them behind and get home and save himself. And he doesn't care about anything except for himself. And he's just a crazy, selfish, narcissistic psychopath. And they're flying behind him, trying to get to him before he gets to the Endurance. And they're saying, fucking, don't try to dock, don't try to dock. You're going to fuck something up. And he's not listening. He's just going to the Endurance. Back at this same time, back on Earth, it's showing Murph going back to the house to get her watch. She just has this feeling that maybe she's not going back. She's not going back specifically for her watch. I think she's going back because she's like, there was something with that ghost. There was something odd about that ghost. So she's going back to her house with Getty, with Topher Grace, to go back to her bedroom and try to figure this out. It's showing this at the same time. And this scene is actually, it's one of the greatest scenes of all time. And it's the other iconic scene in this film. I'd say Miller's Planet and the docking scene. Because this docking scene is insane. And if you were watching in IMAX, that'd be really crazy. There's like a 4K surround sound clip on YouTube of the docking scene that I watched. I mean, I watched this 2 days ago before I watched the movie again today. And it was like so much 4K whatever that I had to like pause and let the video load on YouTube before I could play it. The docking sequences, it's just insane. So fucking Matt Damon, Dr. Mann, is just going up to the Endurance, trying to dock with it. Autopilot's disabled, so he's trying to. He docks with it on his own, but it's not docking properly. It's an imperfect dock, and they're calling him and they're saying, "Don't open the goddamn airlock. Don't open the airlock." Like, dude, don't do it. You're gonna blow something up. And then he's just on there and he's like, I'm just opening the airlock. I don't give a fuck. And he's like talking back to them. He's like, no, I'm gonna do it. He's like, listen, there is a moment, and then the audio cuts out and just boom, explosion. And they see it from their spaceship trying to get to him on the Endurance, that there's this huge explosion in space. He blows up, a section of the Endurance blows up, and it's just another point of, by not using sound, you're using sound brilliantly, because he's like, there is a moment, because he's just going through his weird, stupid speech that he's trying to give them. There is a moment, and then boom, and it's like a silent explosion, and you're like, oh my god, because the population bombs were on that ship. That ship is like their only way home, and it explodes. And then Matthew McConaughey is just like, nope, we're going full speed ahead. And this thing with the explosion, because like in space, like, you know, if you like push something, it's just going to fly forever. So like with this explosion, this whole circular sort of space station has just started spinning in a circle. So Matthew McConaughey, Coop's just like, we're going. And they go up to the base of it, and then their ship starts spinning, and he's like, because they have to spin to align with the rotation of that station to dock to it, because he's like, now I'm gonna dock to this motherfucker in a much more complicated situation than that jerk off had, where everything was still. But he's gonna dock to it, and he has TARS or whatever help him out as well. But he's like, TARS, if I black out, you take the stick and like make sure we dock to it. Not too long in the spinning process, Dr. Brand blacks out, and you see her arms just go up, but fucking Coop is hanging in there, twisting this thing and just spinning and spinning and spinning, trying to dock to this half-exploded space station. And I know they're dealing with a lot of G-forces, which you deal with in a lot of space travel, and I don't think I would handle those G-forces very well, because I've been in a small 10-seater plane that turns to where the small plane is, then the wing is pointed straight down at the earth, and the other wing is pointed straight up in the air, and we were going in a circle like that, going in a circle like where one wing is like the point of turning, that's pointed straight at the earth, and we're going around and around and around, and you can't even like lift your arms. I couldn't lift my arms off my lap. Like I was trying to lift my arms off my lap. I couldn't even lift them because of like those G forces, those gravitational forces or whatever that's doing that, and I like couldn't lift my arms up. So in that situation, like I probably wouldn't have fared well. I probably would have passed out as soon as Dr. Brand did. But it's like I just imagine they would be dealing with a lot of G-force or whatever in that situation. And as soon as after that explosion, when he's going towards the ship, Tars is like, "It's not possible. It's not possible." And Coop is like, "No, it's necessary." Like, oh shit, dude. Like, it's not possible. No, it's necessary. I don't give a fuck. Like, it's necessary. Like, what are you talking about? It's not possible. There's only one option here, and that's we have to dock with this goddamn thing. That's the only fucking option. There's no other option. Like, that's what we got to do. And it's just a great scene. That docking scene is probably one of my favorite scenes in the history of movies. It's probably the greatest scene in this movie, I'd say. It's just phenomenal. So they are then limping along in this damaged Endurance, that space station / ship. I don't know what else to call it. I guess it's just a spaceship. They're like limping along in it, and they're like, they say at that point that the population bombs haven't been affected. The backup generators kicked in after that crazy asshole Matt Damon blew the ship up, and that the population bombs are still good, and that the only option they have at that point is to get to Edmund's planet, the last planet of the 3 that they had options for. The only option they have now is to get to Edmund's planet and abandon goddamn Earth and abandon Coop's kids. But it's all they have left, and to use the population bomb. So the plan is to drift. The black hole is just sucking them in. So the plan is just to drift back to the black hole and then slingshot around it and shoot towards Edmund's planet. And that doing that maneuver cost about 50 years or so on Earth. But so be it. So as they're doing that, as they're slingshotting around the black hole, Coop detaches from the Endurance to lose the weight. So the Endurance and Dr. Brand can get to Edmund's planet. So he's like, detach, I'm gone. And he detaches. He then, I believe, is going through the black hole or around it or into some 5th dimension. And things are getting rocky. And the little tiny ship that he's in by himself, with Tars, I believe, is telling him to eject. So he ejects into space. Or at this point, maybe into just some 5th dimension, but into space, and then he's falling, so obviously he has some gravity at this point, and he ejects from the ship and falls into the Tesseract. This thing that he falls into is called a Tesseract, and in Googling the word Tesseract, in the geometrical sense, in the world of geometry, a Tesseract is like a cube within a cube. So if you have like a geometrically perfect cube and then a little tiny geometrically perfect cube inside of it, they call that a tesseract. That's like where the word comes from, which makes sense, actually. And that's what this is that he falls into, a tesseract. And it was a set that they built, but obviously use a little bit of CGI in the tesseract to make it look a little more not of this world. So he falls into that. And it's extremely weird. And as your first time watching it, you're like, okay, we are way off the reservation at this point. Like, this is now seriously hard for our mind to wrap our head around, because even on like a water planet or an ice planet, we can still kind of wrap our head around it a little bit. And maybe not with the time and the gravity of the situation, but like now we're in something that just doesn't look of this Earth, because now he's in like a 5th dimension, right? This tesseract. And as he's looking around it, you can start to make out that it's books on a bookshelf. Like, very vaguely, you can kind of start to see that. And you can see, then you start seeing like the young Murph in like her bedroom. So then, as the first time watching it, you're like, holy shit, like he's the one behind the bookshelf. And you kind of get that now. At least I did the first time watching it. I was like, oh, he's now behind the bookshelf somehow, sees young Murph and sees himself talking in the bedroom, sees her like trying to decode the dust on the floor and stuff, and sees them talking about, and then he's even realizing, oh, it was me behind the bookshelf. And what I noticed in this Tesseract that I didn't see anywhere else is that a lot of it, like even the open part, like all of the stuff inside the Tesseract, it seems very thread-like. It seems very like cloth-like, like a thread, like they say, like the threads of time. It just seems very like threads, like linen, like cloth, like everything's sort of made up from what it seems like. And I'm not talking about like the big parts of it. I'm talking about like the tiny little details of it, of like the books, or even him viewing the bedroom. When you're looking at that, it seems like it's built up of like threads, and you just hear those metaphors of like the threads of time. So I noticed that. I just noticed that. That's just cool little details. And the whole thing about it is that they say, I think someone says this, time is relative. I think Dr. Brand says this. Time is relative. It can be stretched or squeezed, but it can't be like reversed or jumped forward. Like you can't go in reverse or you can't jump forward in time. Time can just be stretched or squeezed, but but gravity can sort of be transmitted through it. And that's how he was just making those markings on the floor in dust with gravity, and how he makes the watch move or whatever with gravity. And so gravity can kind of be transmitted through time, but obviously not like he can't like go back in time. So time is lost as soon as it passes. He starts talking to Tars. He realized he's still on mic. He's still on mic in his suit with Tars, and Tars is saying like, they're definitely in the black hole, because Tars is saying like, we have the data now for the gravity equation, for that gravity equation that Professor Brand, that Murph needs to save the people on Earth. He's like, I'm seeing all the data right now, but he's like, I'm trying to send it out, but it's not going anywhere. I can't send it out, because that was the whole rule. You can get the data while you're in the black hole. You can't record it or send it. So Coop's like, okay, he's like figuring out, that it's him and now it's his responsibility. How is he going to transmit this goddamn data to her now that he has this sort of window in time only using gravity? So Coop gets the coordinates for the NASA base that they went to in the beginning to meet all these people, and he sets it in her room using the dust in binary code, and then he uses gravity to translate the data to Morse code on the second hand of the watch that he gave to her to finish the gravity equation and save the world. And they're talking about like then Tars says like, he's like, I wonder if it worked. And Tars is like, I think it did. And he's like, how? He's like, the bulk beings are closing this Tesseract. The bulk beings. But they also say in other conversation there that he's like, we are the bulk beings. Like, someone's doing for me what I'm doing for her. So, like, someone in the future is doing for me what I'm doing for her in the past or whatever. We brought us here. The bulk beings brought us here, which is us. And it's all weird. It's all just part of that weird grandfather paradox shit. And then the Tesseract is closing and like folding in on itself. And then Coop finds himself floating outside of Saturn. And you see a ship approaching him, and then he's kind of just out of it. And then he wakes up in a hospital bed. And it tells the doctor says, you look pretty spry for being 124 years old. And because he's 124 years old now, if you want to count the time that's passed on Earth, quote unquote Earth, he realizes that he's on like this weird cylindrical funnel space station where like the walls, it's like a circle. So, that's how you live, walking around this circle is like looking into itself. And he's like, where am I? They're like, Cooper Station. And he's like, damn, you named the station after me? That's not how he sounds. But he's like, you named the station after me? He's like, no, sir. It's actually named after your daughter, Murphy Cooper. He's like, damn, Murphy Cooper. So the space station is named after his daughter. He's like, she's still alive? And he's like, yeah, she'll be here in a couple weeks. She's very old. And it's like, and then the first time I was watching it, when he's like, is she still alive? And they're like, yeah, she's very old. I'm like, oh my God. And it's just, it's presumed that his son is dead, but he gave her those gravity equation. He gave her the rest of the gravity equation for her to save the planet. Or save humanity, not save the planet. He sees that as they're sort of showing him this new space station, that there's like a replica of his farm and his house, and it's like a museum situation. Like they'd make now like an old replica of some like Abraham Lincoln house or something. They made like a replica of his house, but it's all spotless and clean and wiped down because it's like a museum that like kids in school would go visit and like, oh, this is where Murphy Cooper grew up. And Coop doesn't really like it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't fit in there. He's, whatever. It's whatever. He doesn't like it. He rebuilds TARS, his old robot that they found, and but he doesn't like it. He doesn't like it there. He's just hanging out to meet his daughter, and then he meets his daughter, which is crazy because she's like an old woman. She's on oxygen. They say apparently she's over 100 years old. Can't remember if that was in the movie or if that was what the internet sort of figured out because of how long he'd been gone. She's over 100 years old, and she has a whole family around her in her hospital bed, like kids and grandkids. He doesn't know any of them, so he just talks to her, and like she's still wearing the watch, and it's like a really crazy moment because his daughter, how he looks exactly the same as when he left, his daughter is now over 100. It's crazy. And she tells him to go find Dr. Brand. And there's just criticism there about how did she know that Dr. Brand was still out there on Edmund's planet. Somehow she knew. Whatever, that doesn't really matter. But she tells him, she's like, go find Dr. Brand. She's out there. She's probably setting up for a big sleep. She's setting up base, and she's out there on Edmund's planet. And at the same time, it's showing her there. It's showing that she is still out there. She's still alive. And he's like, she's on Edmund's planet setting up camp. And he's like, boom, I'm gone. He's like, all right, I'm going because he has nothing to do there. Like his son is presumed dead. He has nothing left with Murph. Everything is a success at that point. He says goodbye. He can say goodbye to his daughter. And now he's like, there's not as much conflict or I guess sadness as when he left, her when she was 10 years old. He's like, she's okay. She loves him. She doesn't resent him. Whatever. Humanity's safe. So he's like, boom, I'm cutting and I'm going. And he's like fucking grabbing a helmet, grabbing a spacesuit, stealing a spaceship. Guess he's going to go back through the black hole and find Dr. Brand and live with her on this abandoned planet and make a bunch of babies and all these population bombs and have their own little colony and just bang, bang, bang. And when it's showing her making shelter or making base on that planet, like she has her helmet off, so it's like breathable oxygen, and it's like an Earth-like setting. It looks kind of like a desert, but with some life and stuff. So you're like, that planet would actually work, and they're living on Cooper Station. But like, I don't know, she found the planet that actually worked, and it was the planet that the guy that she was in love with was relaying. So it was like her decision to go to Edmund's planet over Man's planet was the right call after all. And so the Interstellar theme is playing, and then he's grabbing his helmet in the spaceship, got TARS, and he's fucking out of there. He's like, I'm cutting and running, because he's a fucking explorer. He's a pioneer. He's not a caretaker. He's not going to hang out on this planet without his daughter. Like, seriously, what is the fucking point, dude? Time to fucking go. So then he's just out of there. And you get that Interstellar theme playing or whatever, and Christopher Nolan's movies end in possibility. It's kind of a notorious thing. Even at the end of Inception, it was like, are they still in a dream, or not, and then you look down and the coin is like spinning on the table, but it like doesn't stop spinning and spinning. So you're like, they're still in a dream. And his movies often end in possibility, which I really like. And even the Batman movies, how at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, like it looked like Batman died or something, but then there was still like another thing at the end where it's like someone like spots him, like Michael Caine spots him in a cafe or something in Europe, and it's like so it's like Christopher Nolan's movies end in possibility. So it's like he still has one mission left to go find Dr. Brand. And it's just a great movie. It's fantastic. It's a little mind-bending at times, and it's a challenging movie at times, but it really has found a spot in giving people a lot of hope and fulfillment. And just the fact that even when it seemed like on the planet all hope was lost, it wasn't. There was still a Hail Mary of Coop saving everybody somehow by using different dimensions and transmitting back mathematical equations. And I really loved learning about the music of this movie, and in the rewatch of it, focusing on the music and focusing on different little details, like mainly music and, whatever. And like attire, like the clothing that she was wearing and stuff like that. And listening to Professor Brand talk to Coop in the beginning and knowing that he was lying and stuff like that. It's just so good for a rewatch time after time. I'm sure I'll be noticing things as I watch this movie over and over, every couple years or so for the rest of my life. Like it's always going to have its place in that it's so just unique and original, and I love that it just came from like a theoretical physicist and a movie producer / philosophy student sitting around thinking of like what's a movie that could be made off of like both of our specialties and all the stuff that it went through, and that Christopher Nolan is just a genius, and Hans Zimmer doing the music is just a genius, and it's such a good interstellar theme. It's just so fucking good. It's just incredible. It's damn near a masterpiece. And it was fun doing all this research and stuff for it. I hope everybody learned something. I know I learned a shitload. Like, I know too much about Interstellar now. But anyway, that's it for me, Eric and Brad Show. This was fun. I will see you guys next time. Later, yo.